Lisa Hawker, welcome back to the Rocky Mountain Writer
Hi,
podcast.
Mark. So good to see you. It's first time podcasting. I can see you, so it's nice.
I think you've been on twice before, and you're right. Those were pre-video days when we were
Yes,
just doing the audio
in the Stone Ages. Yes, yeah.
in the Stone Ages.
Right.
In fact, I took a peek. I think the last one was January of 2019,
Yeah.
right before the Throwaways came out,
Yes.
which is your most recent thriller.
Yes. 3 years ago, but pandemic and stuff. So give me some grace here, please. Or I guess I should say that to myself, right? Give me some grace, self.
Yeah. And you started a business and put a lot of energy and effort into that. And so you've been busy.
A little busy, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll come back to the extracurriculars around the writing career. But the main thing we want to talk about today is your class coming up via RMFW Online University, writing a thriller that readers can't put down.
Yes.
Which starts on July 1st, I believe.
Correct. So July 1st through 30th. It's a self-paced thing, so you can take your time. It's online. So it's gonna be fun. I've done one other class for RMFW University Online, and it was just really fun. And I felt like we were able to take a deeper dive than the normal workshops that we do that are an hour long, at the conference or whatever. This way there's more interaction, there's more being able to practice what you're learning as you learn it, which is really a great platform. So
yeah. And last time I think I actually saw you in person, you were standing in front of a room at RMFW the Colorado Gold Conference last October, and you had one of the large rooms and you had a ton of people in there.
That was fun.
Yeah. And I think that class might have been an hour or two, but you were cranking through the material.
Yeah. I can talk really fast, so yay.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of give folks, without giving away too much, and not that it wouldn't hurt to pass along a few tips in a brief half-hour podcast, but let's give potential enrollees in your class just an idea of how do you structure the class, and what do you expect your students to do during that month?
Okay, so the biggest thing I want to hit on is the things that people will learn in this class, because I think with genres in particular, I don't know about you, Mark, but early on in my writing, which I started when I was a kid, but a genre I really could not somehow wrap my mind around it, right? I just was like, well, it's just a story, whatever. And it took me a long time to figure that out. So one of the things that we start with in this class is, what is a thriller? And I think there is a lot of confusion a lot of times between a mystery and a thriller. And so I completely explain that and give examples so that you know exactly what you're writing, because it took me a long time, like I said, to figure out, oh, that's what I'm writing is a thriller, because I had no idea how to categorize it. And that is the most important thing when you're trying to sell a novel to a publishing house, is where do they put it on the virtual or real shelves, So that's one thing that we talk about. We also talk about thriller subgenres, and there are a lot of them. And so it gives a lot of fun variety for what you can do in the thriller genre. Also talk about thriller conventions, what readers expect from a thriller, which helps them to follow you as an author and to keep reading your books, knowing that they're going to get what they want, because conventions help readers get what they want, what they expect from a book, right? I also talk about the structural plot elements that are expected in the genre, what your ending should do ideally in a thriller, who the expected characters are, what archetypes are involved, and super important, but how to avoid creating cliched mustache twirling villains, which is one of my favorite things, of course. Mm-hmm. And what's the difference between tension and suspense? Because I think there's a lot of confusion around that. Then also, how do you create suspense? How do you naturally weave it into a storyline without making it super obvious or feel like a hammer coming down on your head? And then also, how to use pacing. What does pacing look like, and how do you actually write it? How do you use it? What does the tool look like, and how to use it? And with all of this stuff, there will be exercises that people can complete that they can put into practice what they're learning as we're learning it. And so I'm really excited about this. I've taught this a couple of times in person, so it's fun to be able to expand it into like a month-long online, pretty intensive class. So I'm psyched about it.
Yeah, very cool. So just a question on the logistics. You say it's self-paced. So basically, do the students who enroll and sign up get a module every week, or how does that work every few days, or is it all available, all the content available at the outset, and they just go through it as they want, and then you meet once a week and discuss? Or
well, so that is such a great question. I'll tell you why. This is really funny, but the old platform that we used to use for RMFW University is different from the one we're using now. So I'm still figuring that out. But from what I can tell, it looks as though, sorry, yeah, I'm really obviously not the one to be talking about this, but from what I can tell, it's all up there and you can pull it as you want to and go through it. And obviously as the instructor, you can reach out to me anytime and show me stuff and I can read it and give you feedback and help you with it. So that's my understanding. I could be completely wrong, Mark, but you never know.
Are you planning any group discussions then?
Not at this point, but if that's something folks want, we can certainly try that. I mean, but that would, entail setting up some sort of schedule rather than self-pacing. But yeah, that's possible. I mean, it'll all be a big surprise. Not all of it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the beginning of that list of topics. And I think one thing that is probably an ongoing source of not controversy, but at least discussion is mystery versus thriller and the various subgenres of thriller. How do you describe the difference between mystery and thriller?
So with a mystery, typically what you have, and this mystery tradition goes back a long way, very long way. And so often it will start with a dead body, right? And a sleuth of some type, whether it's a professional one, an amateur one, just some schmo off the street, starts picking up clues and starts trying to figure out what happened. And it involves, red herrings, and it involves twists and trying to get the end. And at the end, we discover who the killer is, okay? Or what, perpetrator of whatever crime, but typically it's a murder, right? And then there are so many subgenres of mysteries, as you know, right? Cozies and on and on and on.
Oh, wait a minute. I have to write down a title idea. My new title idea is Some Schmo Off the Street.
It's a classic. Yes, it's classic for sure. And then with the thriller, what you've got is often your main character is right from the get-go in some sort of danger, being chased, being pursued. There is something that's hanging over the MC's head, right? Where it's like action must be taken right now. Whereas with a mystery, the pace can be a little more languid. It can be a little slower, where with a thriller from the get-go, you need motion. And obviously you're going to have your down times, and that's part of pacing, which we get into later. But there's also often a ticking clock. Often the reader is one step ahead of the main character. So the reader knows what's going on, but the main character doesn't, which adds to the tension and suspense. So they're, as you can see, they are very different animals. Now they're hybrids. Those are harder to sell though. So yeah, I mean, it's to me, it's a fascinating subject.
Yeah. And generally the protagonist in the thriller, and I'll say this more as a question than a statement, is not necessarily at all a clue finder. That the person is more just an average person. It could be at any level. It could be any level of income, any level of power,
I always say that it's ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances through no fault of their own, basically. Now, my protagonists, in general, they end up being clue finders because they are going, how do I get out of this? And so whether it's trying to find out who or what is, hanging over their head, or if something has happened in conjunction with whatever. One of my protagonists, for instance, is framed for 3 murders. And he's like, well, I kind of need to find out what happened so I can get out of this, so I don't go to prison, So there's an element typically of clue finding in some sense or another.
Do you have any opinion or thoughts on what types of people like to write thrillers versus people who really like?
What are you saying, Mark? I don't know. I feel like this is an accusation somehow.
No judgment. No
well,
judgment.
I think for me, I'll speak for me and then I'll move outwards in the rings there. But for me, it's because I like excitement. I like high tension. I like to be surprised. And I also am very interested in the nature of evil and whether it's an outside force or if it's all mental illness, you know? So I'm very interested in that. And of course, there's always a lot of evil involved in a thriller, right? But I think in general, the people who like to write thrillers are either thrill seeking, they're probably risk takers. A lot of them are extroverts. I'm kind of on the borderline between introvert and extrovert. I call myself a loud introvert. So I think in general, those are the characteristics.
Yeah. How do you know when you have a good idea for a thriller? And I want to kind of bridge over to maybe you could give us a little backstory and we can talk about one of your books, The Throwaways, because that started out as a short story, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
And you had it in your drawer for a while.
Yes, for a very long time.
Yeah, and then it became. So how do you know what you've got? You can kind of dream up scenarios where you can take somebody who's a regular person and put the squeeze on them, take away a child or, kidnapping or a terrorist, something or other. But right. How do you know whether it's going to work?
Mark, if I knew the answer to that, my friend, I would be living in a very large house somewhere and probably driving a Bentley. But for me, I think, and I'm sure this is true for you too, is that whatever excites me and makes me want to spend all my time writing on something, to me, that's a good idea. And I think we always have to start there because, and I'm sure you've known people or even tried it yourself of trying to write to the market, because having a good idea, kind of necessitates thinking that, well, this is gonna be a big seller or whatever. But I think, especially in my dotage here, in my older years, I'm really kind of going back to my roots in the sense that I'm going, okay, but what excites me? Because unfortunately, once you get onto that roller coaster of the publishing industry, there is so much pressure to come up with a good idea, to come up with the bestseller, especially after you've had one. And that can really muddy the waters of your love of writing and your love and your creativity and all those things. And so it's a very delicate balancing act. It's crazy. As far as The Throwaways goes, yes, it started as a short story. I wrote it in college, which was a very long time ago. But the way that story idea came up was, and this happens to me a lot, is that somebody will tell me a story that happened in their life, something crazy, typically something crazy. You won't believe what happened. That's usually how the story starts, right? You won't believe this. And so my friend John, who I'm still friends with 40 some years later, he and his friend Rick went to the liquor store one night, and this guy was there and said, "Can you give me a ride?" And they were these two 18-year-olds who were like, still had hay in their hair, and they were scared into giving this guy a ride. He said to go to his girlfriend's house, but what he was doing was making a major drug buy. And he came out with a big brick of heroin out of the warehouse that they took him to. And I remember thinking at the time, oh my gosh, that could have gone bad in so many ways, right? I mean, and so I'm the kind of person who just spins out into infinity, all these crazy ideas, all these things that could happen. And so for me, it's kind of this gift of catastrophizing. And so that's where I go, is what's the crappiest thing that could possibly happen. Let's make that happen, you know? So that's really where a lot of my ideas come from, is either hearing people's stories or from podcasts of storytellers. So
that's great. And so short story, way back when you kept that idea, was sort of bubbling in your subconscious. And at some point you said, I can take that whole thing and turn it into a novel. And obviously in the in-between time, you had written several novels and learned a lot about writing.
right.
As you look back to the seed idea, probably lots of changes as it developed and grew and bloomed.
Yes, because I'm the kind of person, unfortunately, gosh, just the way my brain works is that I, in stories, I go on all these tangents that don't make sense in the larger part of the story. And especially early on in my career, I would let my characters go off and do whatever, whether it pushed the story forward or not, because I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And so it took me a long time to figure out, oh, those tangents we need to, you know, it's the whole idea of killing your darlings, right? Learning to do that, which was, it took quite a lot of doing to learn to do that. So yeah, that's because the original story had all these crazy tangents that I look back now, I'm like, you know, shake your head at your younger self. What the hell, you know?
Yeah. And in previous chats, you've promoted the idea of the story grid, that you've gone from a pretty much a pantser, just start in writing, and now you're still a believer in really getting organized and using a chart.
Yeah, you know, in some ways, and it's funny, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that, you know, in my older years, starting to kind of back off from that a little bit more, because I do believe in, especially after you're done with a manuscript, to use the story grid to make sure that everything works. But in the beginning stages, really focusing more on the writing and the pantser aspect of that. And it's like anything else, right? There's good and bad about both pantser and plotter, right? If there's some way to be closer to the middle with both those things, I think you're going to hit a real sweet spot. And I know that for me, when I have done that, it's been a better book and a better experience. So, you know, it's just everything. It's a constant fight, you know, trying to get it right. But, you know, we do our best, right? We do our best.
Yeah. One thing, it's interesting to me, I was just reading a little story today in the New Yorker, it wasn't that long, about James Patterson and why he's such a big, huge success. And he was quoted in there about saying, you know, just reduce everything to action, and really just get rid of any fluff and just clean it up, make it sure it's lean as can be. He actually talked about how when he wrote the outline for Along Came a Spider, which was the first Alex Cross novel, that he realized basically it was such a detailed outline that was basically the novel.
The book, yeah.
Yeah, which to me doesn't seem like writing. And I know it is, but how do you balance that? Because writers want to put in color and they want to describe things and be lyrical. How do you balance it all?
Well, I think that's interesting you bring up James Patterson, because obviously I'm gonna guess the most successful, right, thriller writer there is.
Yeah.
But, and you know, no shade to this guy, because clearly he has got this stuff figured out. And I really hope that he enjoys what he does, right? But that is really reduced, and I don't, reduced may be too harsh of a term, but reduced the business of writing to just business.
Yeah.
You know, here we're building a widget. We're McDonald's. We do it the same way every single time, and that to me takes a lot of the heart out of it. So I think as a writer, you kind of have to decide at some point whether you are strictly in this to make a ton of money, to make a name for yourself, all that stuff, or if you want to write, you know. And at some point, hopefully those two things converge, but they don't always. And, you know, unfortunately, and I've said this before, but unfortunately, because my very first book was a bestseller, that has really kind of messed me up in that whole thing, because like I said, I felt so much expectation on me to repeat, and it hamstrung me a lot. So I don't know. I think we all need a lot of therapy to kind of do what we do because there are a lot of moving parts. But I don't know. Like I said, as I get older, the more I want to lean towards heart rather than commerce, I guess. And no, like I say, no shade to anybody who does that. My hat is off to them. Whatever works for them and what brings them joy and what brings them satisfaction in their work, I'm all for it. I'm 100% for it. So.
Yeah. Well, I think you raise an interesting point that a lot of people might think a thriller is not a vehicle for personal expression and personal views of the world, or maybe solution-oriented kind of philosophy about how the world should run, because a mystery character tends to have more time to ruminate as they solve the problem. They can also be commentating to the reader through third-person close narrative or first person. They can be sharing their worldview and showing what they think is screwed up and what needs fixing, et cetera. Whereas we expect the thriller to just keep moving. And Patterson in this piece talks about action, 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 action.
Right.
So you raise a good point, though, that, I mean, I assume any novel can be a vehicle for personal expression. You just have to find a way to imbue your thoughts into that plot.
It's really true. I mean, because for my books, they're not just about action, action, action. I do pace them well, I feel. And for me, the human element always has to come first. Yes, the thriller structure is very important, but for me, I mean, for instance, the Throwaways is really about friendship and about about the bond between lifelong friends. The Drowning Game is about finding your true family. Body and Bone is about overcoming your personal demons, and End of the Road is really about finding yourself and being true to yourself. And so each of these things, even though they're thrillers, they're still human stories, and I strive to do that. And the thriller genre is just the vehicle that I put my characters in.
Right. Yeah. Well, we can't, I don't want to belabor James Patterson too much, but he's in the news this week. I don't know if you've noticed, but he's being really controversial because this week he said it's really hard for white guys to get published right now. And with a guy with 400 million books in print, and if you're on social media at all and want to follow that, but I was just dumbstruck at that. This guy should be, and I know he's done a lot to help bookstores. He's got a generous approach that appears very philanthropic, but for him to come out and say that white male writers are somehow harmed by the current structure at a time when we're going through so much in terms of making sure all voices are being heard, I just thought his timing and is just completely tone deaf.
I would agree with that 100%. But I also think I am so disheartened by, 20 years ago, James Patterson may have said that, somewhere, but the whole world would not have heard it, and unfortunately with social media and the immediacy of us all being able to shout into the void, there are all these ugly things that are right in front of our faces all the time, and it just gets uglier. And this is something that I've been struggling with a lot lately, especially since COVID. I have been completely off of social media and off news because of the ugliness that has been happening. And so, you telling me that, it's just like, oh gosh, because I didn't know anything about it. And in some ways, I feel like before we were all in each other's faces all the time, there was a lot less conflict. And I got to tell you, the good things about social media, obviously, is bringing these issues to the fore, like getting the voices heard and so forth. But it is so unhelpful for James Patterson, to say that, and then for all the news outlets out there, then to trumpet it out further and further and further. It's
Yeah.
not helpful.
No.
He's entitled to his opinion, whatever. He's wrong. He's empirically wrong. He just is. But yeah, this whole thing has just got me, really spun. So it's a rough one.
Yep. Well, unfortunately, there are lots of people out there going, yeah, finally somebody's saying, he's going to create some people who are going to sign up for that.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
This is the climate we live in now, though. It's everything is black or white. You're over here, you're over here, you better find your place right now. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm going to just stay in my office here and hide from all this crap because, oh my gosh, it's rough.
So Lisa, can you talk a little bit about it's you talk about balance the last few years, with COVID and starting a business, a restaurant, tap room, put a lot of energy and effort into that, obviously. And your writing was there. Obviously, you're trying to keep your hand in it. You're still going to conferences and being visible. But it is not, a lot of people think, okay, you're a writer and now you sold a book and you're doing well and bestseller, et cetera. Now you're going to be a writer. And that's just going to be an uphill, straight up climb.
No, that's not how it works, unfortunately. Yeah. So my journey obviously has been up and down and in and out. And unfortunately, as human beings, we tend to fixate on things. And I've been so fixated on, but this is what I am. And nothing is happening right now. So what does that say about me as a human being? That means I am a failure, period. Okay, that's the end of the story. You're a failure, that's it, you're done. And losing a business in January, same thing. Of course, it was during COVID and, that's when we had to open because of various issues and so forth. So there has been a lot of feeling of failure and having then to do the work of coming back from that, because you can either become bitter and self-pitying and all that, or you can claw your way out and figure out what you really want out of this thing that we do. What do we want from it? What do we really want? And so I've been really working through a lot of that, and I think eventually I will get to a place where I will find that love again, because for me and Mark, I assume you go through periods too where you're like, what the heck, why would I ever do this? And other times where you're like, why would I ever do anything else?
Right. Right.
So I want to spend more time in that place of why would I ever do anything else? And by changing my own expectations of myself and my definitions of success and failure, and really, really working to define that for myself. And I think we all need to do that, right? We all need to do that, because otherwise we get caught up in, I'm going to sell 400 million books and, that's all that matters. And I'm going to be super popular, or whatever. So I think, really trying to decide, and especially at my age, I just turned 60 in March, and trying to decide, okay, what's the last half, haha, I'm going to live another 60 years. No, I hope not, God.
40.
The last quarter of my life, right? What is that going to look like? What am I going to do with it? So yeah, it's been, what a crazy time this has been. My gosh, nobody said that enough, right?
But you're not somebody who seems to be able to dwell on regrets. You made the decisions you made at the time, and yeah.
And honestly, yay for this. I'm not a regretful person. I don't sit around and go, well, I wish we wouldn't have, because with the Tap House, for instance, we did some great work there. We did the absolute best we could. We gave bands a place to play when no one else would have them for 18 months. We made a lot of incredible friendships, people we never would have met otherwise. We just showed a lot of love to people, and how can that be called a failure? It's just money, right? Really, when it comes to, it's just money. And then with the writing thing, I don't have any regrets either with that. But the most important thing then is forward, move forward, keep going, keep going.
Well, the fact that you're teaching a class means you're leaning forward.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
Whatever we can do, right? Well, and being around writers is always helpful too. But you know what? I think the other thing that's important to remember is it's okay to take a break sometimes too.
Yep.
It's okay to take a break.
Are you planning to teach at Colorado Gold, do you know yet? Or?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I have a very full slate. I have
good.
a Thursday class. I'm on a panel. I'm doing two workshops. So yeah, just balls to the wall on that one. So
that's great. The Thursday class.
I'm allowed to say balls to the wall, but
we'll let you get away with that one. We don't have to bleep anything around here, that, as far as I know.
I appreciate that.
So
anyway,
the Thursday class is the day before the conference starts, kind of a special class.
Right, master class, and that one is on outlining and plotting. That really helps for people who write thrillers or mystery, genre stuff, commercial fiction. So.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you mentioned music, and I think the one thing that's missing from your curriculum for your July class is how to build a playlist that goes along with the plot you're developing for your thriller. Because you're the playlist queen.
Yes, I should put together a class like that, because that's so much fun. Although that is part of the class that I'm teaching on Sunday. And Mark, you're not gonna believe this, but somebody put me in the 8 o'clock slot on Sunday. Who would do that? They know me. They've seen me in the bar on Saturday nights. What is going on? Anyway, but that class is called Getting Your Writing Mojo Back, and music is part of that. And we talk about playlists and so forth. So there's a little bit of that in there. But I do think you're right. I think I do need to build a class about that.
That's great. Well, before I ask you the final question to recommend a book, now I'm going to ask you for a few music tips, because I'm always looking for those as well. So any bands floating your boat these days?
Oh gosh, I should have prepared for this, and there is, what the hell? I'm sorry, let me look at my phone right quick.
Now, I need to note that I'm talking to a writer with, I think it's a Stratocaster in the background there, that red guitar. Is that a Fender Stratocaster back there?
2 acoustic guitars, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see, what have we got here?
She's on her iPhone, I believe. We can't see it on the video, but
I'm sorry. I'm
all right.
Trying to find what the most recent. Oh gosh, Mark, I'm so sorry. I'm coming up empty.
We can add it to the show notes later. You can email me a few suggestions, and
I will do that. Because I do have one. It's like right back here, but I can't quite pull it out. So I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
However, all right. Final question then.
Yes.
Always like to recommend a book or a writer or something you've been reading lately that you can pass along to others.
Okay. All right. Well, so this is funny. You talk about the James Patterson thing. It's hard for white men to, okay. I am reading American Dirt by Janine Cummins. Are you familiar with the controversy around that one?
Absolutely, big time. I haven't read it, but before you tell me, I've had so many people say that the controversy was unjustified, that it's such a great book. I don't know. They said the controversy was way overblown, that the book is worth reading.
Well, I'll tell you, I didn't know about the controversy before I started reading it. Like I said, I've been off the news. I've been off social media because I am tired of all these voices shouting in my ears. So my friend had sent me this book a couple years ago, and I happened to pick it up. It's a nice hardcover, crack it open. And I'm telling you, the way that this woman describes emotional response in ways I literally have never read before. And I've done a lot of reading. I don't know if you noticed, but I've done a lot of reading. And so when there's somebody who comes along who is able to describe the human experience the way that she does in such a relatable, heart-wrenching, vivid way, I sit up and take notice. It was only after I got about halfway through it, I don't know what I'm the kind of person who, whenever I'm reading somebody where I immediately go into research mode. I have to know everything about this author. I have to know their influences. I have to know everything. And I get on there and immediately I'm hit with the controversy, right? She got a 7-figure advance.
Right.
And she is a white woman writing about a Mexican family.
Right.
And they're saying that's a big no-no. And while I while I understand what they're saying, and that more people of color should be getting 7-figure advances, right? And this is from Flatiron Books, which was kind of shocking to me. But anyway, I also thought, I don't know, I kind of feel like this 7-figure advance was deserved, because it is beautiful and it is visceral and it is heart-wrenching and it is gorgeous. And I'm like, yeah, but the writing, forget about all the political stuff out here. The writing, man, come on. And I mean, there were actually a couple of big time reviews that were like, well, the writing is not that good. And then later in the reviews saying, this book has stuck with me for months.
Yeah.
Like, then what does good writing mean? What does it mean? You know? And for me, it's just right here. That's all I need to know. So I'm going to recommend it with a caveat that, yeah, there's a lot of controversy out there. And I feel bad for everyone involved.
Yeah. She was in the middle of her beginning of her book tour when the controversy hit, and she had to stop her book tour.
Yeah.
Which, it just feels so wrong. Maybe if she had gotten a $10,000 advance rather than the big target on her back advance, it might have been a whole different story. And I also think personally that had she written a book that had a Mexican family, maybe as secondary characters.
Exactly. That is the key. That is the key.
And it just doesn't seem like, why can't you use all the powers of your imagination and research and empathy? If you're pouring empathy into your characters and you're treating them with respect, why can't you? Because clearly the story had to do with immigration, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah, and it's harrowing. Well, here's what I'll say that I feel like makes it valid as a work, as a piece of art, is that, well, one of the many things. Obviously, I've told about many of the things. I think the way that she writes about this experience is from, a white person's perspective, but the white person writes in such a way that other white people can understand them. Do you understand what I'm saying? So for me, she is building empathy for these poor immigrants through her art. How can that be wrong? How can that be wrong? When I am feeling like, which I felt empathy to begin with, but this has amplified it because now I'm inside of what feels like a real family story. So I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I really don't.
I'm going to read that book now. I've been meaning to, but I'll move that one up.
Yeah. I think you'll dig it. Yeah, let me know what you think.
Yeah, I will. All right, Lisa Hawker. Well, good luck with your class in July, and good luck with the Writing Mojo. And really appreciate all your insights and your time today. So we'll catch up with you again down the road, I hope.
Thank you so much, Mark. And yay for your book coming out in January. Just had to shout that out. Yay.
Thank you.
So excited. Thank you.
Okay.